Hello friends, my name is Shivam from DevOps Schools and I will help you to enable your learning process in various technologies of DevOps, artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data and many more. This is our initiative to help you by sharing multiple tutorials and videos. And if you want any specific tutorials or any particular topic, then please do comment in the below comment section and I will help you with it. Also, please subscribe to our premium services on YouTube, which will give you access to more content and videos to enhance your knowledge about all these topics. Also, if you want me to help you with regards to the online trainings and classroom sessions by our qualified trainers, then please do write me at contact@devopsschool.com. Thank you.
Okay.
So similar to how we release our applications right in our environment, AWS will have a highly centralized process for changing any changes to hardware or software.
Okay.
Other than that, the industry third-party attestations and assurance programs also happen time and then to make sure that AWS follows all the compliance level at a very strict process. So all the external attestations are done by multiple audits and multiple certification teams are there. They publish the service organization control SOC reports, and they are available for users to see on the AWS documentation as to what different certifications and attestations are held by AWS. With respect to public sector certifications or private sector certifications or government certifications, be it healthcare certifications like HIPAA compliance, PCI compliance. So all these compliances are held by AWS to make sure that the customer have enough trust for using these cloud services. Other than that, your access points which are provided to the customer access points, which are also known as API endpoints, they allow HTTPS access only. So using HTTPS secured socket layer connections, you can establish communication with AWS services. And it also uses SSL and TLS based encryptions. And SSL encrypts the transmission, protecting each request and the response which is sent and received at the AWS. So your data within the transit and at the rest in AWS infrastructure, they are all secured using SSL endpoints and security groups. So they are, so first of all, I'm talking about SSL endpoints. Then on the layer at where your data is stored, security groups provide prevention or defense like firewalls to your servers. You can use security groups for controlling access as to what rules should be allowed to your system. You can provide firewalls based on port numbers, IP addresses, where should the traffic come from, and all that configurations can be done. Security groups can be associated with AWS EC2 instances as well as Amazon RDS, Redshift. Other services can also use the security groups, right? And then lastly, the VPC. VPC is something which, as we discussed, VPC is something which encloses all your resources within a private cloud, and that provides you a very robust security mechanism so that resources which are hosted on your cloud are not accessible outside the cloud, outside your VPC. And any external access which you want to give, you will give it at using the network access layers list. I mean, network access control list, NACLs you will use for providing your access to your resources. AWS multi-tier security groups typically looks like this, where you have one subnet, you have a web tier, and in second subnet you have application tier, and in third subnet you have a database tier, and they are all segregated by their subnets, and they are also having security groups to allow only restricted ports. So web's tier will access the application tier only by that specific port. So let's say if your application server is your Tomcat server, for instance, for example. So only port number, if you are allowing 8080 as a port number to be accessed, only that port is allowed. All the other ports will be blocked. So that blocking can be done by your security groups. Similarly, on your database tier, if you use Oracle, for instance, Oracle will have 15, 12, 21 as the port number by default. You can again give any port number of your choice, but that port number can be allowed and other ports can be blocked. So you can configure multi-tier security by using these security groups in AWS. Then there is this AWS IAM. IAM is a service which provides user management, user access management within AWS. Using IAM, you can create AWS users, you can manage users, you can create groups and manage groups. You can also provide permissions to allow and deny their access to AWS. You can use, now this is like user management in AWS. In short, if I tell you about this is like all user management within AWS. AWS IAM users and their access, IAM permissions and their roles, and then federated users and their permissions. If you are using any federated corporate identity, for example, if you are using AWS from within your corporate, you already have some identity management system in your corporate. So AWS can be integrated with your federated system with your existing corporate entities, and it will then grant you access to AWS resources. Anything like bucket or EC2, you can access them based on your corporate ID as well, without creating new AWS identities. That's also possible. So AWS IAM authentication, if you are a normal user, a typical user, you will be given, if you want to use Management Console, you will have to have the IAM user password and the account ID or account alias. If you are creating your own account in free tier and you are using that, you will log in with your root user maybe, or you can also create extra users for accessing that. Like in the example which I have shared, I was using my own account. If you see here, so this programmer is one IAM user in my account. The account name is Aman Khan. This is my account in AWS and I am having more than one users. Programmer is one user. I can create any number of users in my account as I want. But the root account is this. So if I sign in with this IAM user, I am giving restricted access to this IAM user. I'm not giving complete access. If I want to use the root, I can do that as well. So AWS services and resources can be accessed by using console. We have seen that, or even CLI or SDK. So all these platforms can be authenticated. For you can have users and systems to be authenticated before they use these services. So management console, if you are account owner on this management console, you can sign in and directly create users of your choice. It is not advisable to use root account directly every time. Rather, like I have done, you can do that. You can create custom users. You can create users and give them individual access to the services what they want to use. So IAM is like gatekeeper of all your services on AWS. You will use it very cautiously, judiciously, as what your choices are. So how does IAM authentication happen? So in the earlier example, in the earlier slide, we have seen AWS Management Console. In this slide, we are talking about CLI authentication. CLI is also used for controlling your AWS services. And if you want to use CLI, you have to generate a programmable access. You will get something called as access key ID like this. Okay, so this access key ID and your secret access key, these are the two things which you will use for getting programmatic access on your user.
Where do we create these keys?
Yeah, so I will show you here. Let me disconnect from this user and I log in as a root user. So I will say here, you see, sign in as root user. So this is the user. So you will have to provide user email address. Give me a moment. I will do that here and come back. So you can also restrict this using multi-factor authentication. So I have that multi-factor authentication enabled here. Okay. So I am in the root user now. So this user, you have to always restrict that. You have to make sure that you are not. You have to secure this user basically. And in this user, if you go to IAM,
Are there any issues if we do all the services using the root user? Uh, Creating
I
instance
mean,
and all
it's
that?
you can do anything with your root user,
Yeah,
but it
but
is not recommended because root user is like the super powerful user.
yeah,
And if you have any breach of the user, maybe if you lose your credentials or anything of that nature happens, you will have other issues. So you have to make sure that you are not falling in that trap.
right.
So even as an individual user, I am not using my root user. If you remember, I was using a programmer user which I created for logging in, and I do that on a general basis. But this is my root user. I have one user here which I created. This user is part of system admin. This user can do sort of anything, but only at the administrative level. This user cannot do any billing related information or any monetary things it cannot do. So if you want to create a user, you will simply say add user. So this add user will you can create a user, maybe for example DB users. Now you have a choice. What type of access do you want to provide to this user? Is it programmatic access or just the console? So either of that you should choose. You cannot choose. You cannot leave it empty. If you have a user, you have to give either programmatic access or console access, or both as well. You can give both as well. If you give console access, you have to generate a password, or maybe you can give some password to the user and do it, or you do auto-generated password. So you do it like this. If you don't use management console, you use only programmatic access. You will get you have to add this user to a group. I will add this user to system admin group. I'll add this user to system admin group, and then I'll say next.
So these groups were created by you or already present?
So there are some groups which are already created. I can again create groups also.
Okay.
There will be a lot of groups which are created by default.
Okay.
So I can create a group and attach that group to this. A user can be part of multiple groups. Okay. A user may not be part of any group. A simple independently existing user also. Tags, review. This user has no permissions. Permission boundary is not set. I'm not giving any permission. I'm simply creating a user. I can modify the permissions as per my requirements at any given point in time. I'll say create user. So this user is created now. So this is the access key and secret access key. I'll not show this because that's something which is sensitive. I can download the CSV and share it across. So if I want to access now as a DB user, I have to configure this access key ID and secret access key in my applications, and then I'll get programmatic access to this user. So user management, for user management, you have this something called as groups. As the number of users managing environment increases, you can always create multiple groups for segregating users. Like there is this DevOps group, there is this test dev group. User A and B are part of group 1 and user C and D are part of group 2. Then IAM authorization. So for authorizing a user to the ability to do something, you have these policies. After a user or system has been authenticated, they have to be authorized to access AWS services. To assign permissions to a user group or role or resource, you create policies. Policies are JSON documents which explicitly specifies the permissions. And IAM role is similar to a user. Role or user or groups or resources, they all need policies to be authorized. I hope you are getting this. This is a sort of abstract thing. You may spend some time to understand this, but this is how it works. For authorization, you have to have policies, and these policies are assigned to user, group, role, or a resource. Right?
Resource means
S3 bucket is a resource. S3 bucket is a resource. Yeah.
Right.
And EC2 instance is a resource.
Right.
So they need policies. An IAM role is similar to a user. That is in an AWS identity with permissions policies that determine what identity can or cannot do in a AWS environment. Okay. Instead of uniquely be associated to one person, role is intended to be assumed by anyone who needs it. All right. So role doesn't have any credentials, password, or anything like that. A role can be assumed by anything. If a user is assigned to a role, access keys are created for the user. Policies and roles are covered in detail. In a minute, I'll talk about more about policies and roles in the following slide. So a policy document looks something like this. Policies are simply documents which are created in JSON format. It will have these statements which explicitly specifies what permissions has to be specified. At the skeleton, or we will see the skeleton of the policy, it will have something called as version, ID, statement, SID, and the effect, what effect you want to specify. The effect defines what effect will be when the user requests access. It will either be allow or deny. So right now it is allow. It will allow all resources, which is satisfying this condition. So the condition is the IP address of the source will be this. So if this IP address is the source, it will allow for all resources. So the default is that resources are denied to user. So typically you allow that and explicitly mention allow in the document. Like here I have said for actions EC2. So these are the actions and this is the effect on this condition. I hope you are getting this. So only these actions are allowed for this user on this condition. If this condition is not met, this will be not allowed.
So this key in this object, where will we get this? Like how to know what to add? Is there any document where we can refer or something?
So these policies can be built on AWS. You have this policy builders. Any resource you can do that using the GUI based tools as well.
Okay, okay.
So it's not that you have to memorize it. You can do that. Policies can be generated by tools.
Okay.
Similarly, action S3 get objects effect allow on this bucket. So now when this policy is created, now this policy can be assigned to IAM user or a group of users. So if this policy is assigned to IAM one user, that user can do those actions. If this policy is assigned to group, that group can do that actions. Similarly, this policy can be assigned to roles. Let's say I create a role. DB users, I have a role maybe. So if this policy is assigned to that role, all the users of that role can also do that.
Right.
So what is the role? IAM role uses a policy. IAM role has no associated credentials. Role is not having any credentials. It's not having username password. IAM users, applications and services can assume roles. A user can assume role, an application can assume role, and services can assume role. Alright. If you have a EC2 instance which has to talk to S3 bucket, for example. So if you already have defined a policy and that policy is assigned to that role, which allows that S3 bucket to be accessed, AWS resource or EC2 can simply assume that role. So that EC2 instance can assume the role which is having the policy, and the policy says that S3 bucket is accessible.
So that S3 bucket will be accessible from that EC2 instance now?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
Or you can directly using IAM roles in general, you will access these buckets or any resources, for example. If you have to talk from one resource to other resource, as I said in the example, roles can be used.
Right.
Example, A Python application hosted on EC2 instance needs to interact with S3. Okay. So AWS credentials are required. What do? Option 1, store AWS credentials on EC2 instance. Option 2, securely distribute AWS credentials to AWS services and applications. Okay. So it is not a good practice to store credentials. Rather, you create roles and assign that to your services. IAM roles instance profiles. Instance profile is a container for IAM role that you can use to pass role information to EC2 instance when the instance starts. So you can use this roles from the EC2 instances to provide any programmatic access to the things. So let's say you create an instance and you select IAM role as to what IAM role should be given access to this EC2 instance. In this example, IAM role with the name Python EC2 access is created by an IAM user. The role grants access to an S3 bucket. Now, the application developer selects this role while creating EC2 instance. The instance will host a Python application that will need access for S3 bucket. Now, in this, IAM role may be associated with an EC2 instance during creation only. The policy associated with the role can be modified at any time. The user launching EC2 instance needs appropriate permissions to associate IAM role to EC2 instance. Now, when this role satisfies this requirement, it is allowed to access S3 resources. IAM roles. What do you mean by assuming a role? IAM, yeah, go ahead if you want to.
Are you
A
asking?
user can be assumed to a role. A
Sorry,
user
come again?
or a resource. A user can be assumed as a role. That's what was said in the beginning.
Yeah, so the role
User
can be
or
assumed.
resource.
Yeah, user can assume a role, service can assume a role, as well as a resource can assume a role.
Yeah. So, what is the question here?
That's what. What does assuming a role mean?
Okay. So whatever permissions are given to that role, associated to that role. So if a user assumes it, so the user will have the permission to access.
That, yes, exactly. Yeah. So in this example, I have a typical scenario where I have two accounts, account A and account B. IAM user A1 is part of account A. This user, which is in the center of this diagram. So this user is part of account A. I have an IAM user B, which will be part of account B. So let me walk through steps one by one. IAM policy named IAM admin policy with access to S3 bucket is associated to IAM role 1. User A has that policy with restricted access. So here, yes, to this S3 bucket, IAM user is having access because he is assuming the admin role.
Please enroll our general membership for $399 plan to get access of all the parts.
Along with that, you can access our other tutorials such as Docker, Ansible, Jenkins, Terraform, Splunk, AWS, Azure, and various other DevOps related premium tutorials with our channel membership. If you would have any issues with our channel membership, you can drop an email to us at contact@devopsschool.com, or you can also unsubscribe from channel membership anytime if you don't want to continue or did not like the video. To get our channel membership, click onto the join button, select the $399 plan and grow your skills immensely. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries. We will reply to them at the earliest. Thanks for watching.